Nigel Farage is furious and he's not holding back. The Reform UK leader has launched a scathing attack on West Yorkshire Police after uncovering a shocking 2017 tweet from Bradford Police. The tweet revealed that instead of arresting suspects linked to grooming gangs, the police opted to send letters, yes, letters, warning individuals about crimes of a sexual nature. Farage's outrage spilled over during a fiery speech at the Reform UK North West Conference, where he slammed the police for their pathetic and disgraceful handling of the scandal. Check out the clip of Nigel Farage as he lets loose at the Reform UK conference.
How many thousands, tens of thousands of men, and in some cases, as with this one, female accomplices, are still living out there, have never, ever been picked up by the police, who've never faced prosecution for something that I think almost represents the most unique evil I've seen in this country in my lifetime. They're out there.
Do you agree with his statement? Let us know in the comments. The grooming gang scandal is one of the darkest chapters in modern British history, with thousands of young women and girls subjected to years of sexual abuse and exploitation. Towns across England and Scotland have borne witness to this horror, with the majority of perpetrators identified as belonging to Pakistani grooming gangs. The issue, Farage argued, is far more widespread than many believe. What has become clear, he thundered, is that this isn't isolated to just 6 or 8 northern towns, as we once thought. Charlie Peters at GB News has uncovered evidence that these barbarities have taken place in at least 50 towns. 50 towns. And now we're hearing new stories from the south of England too. This is a nationwide tragedy that no one wants to face up to. Farage went further, accusing the authorities of operating a 2-tier justice system. What we have here, he said, is poor, young, white girls being systematically abused, while those in power were too scared to confront the issue for fear of offending a small percentage of the population. Let me be clear, this isn't just a failure of policing, it's a betrayal of the British people. Farage's anger was palpable as he recounted the details of the Bradford police tweet. They wrote letters. Imagine that, a girl goes to the police, says she's been raped, and instead of kicking down doors and making arrests, they write a letter. This is utterly shameful. Letters don't protect children. Arrests do, charges do, prison sentences do, and yet they weren't doing their job. His remarks drew widespread applause from the audience, many of whom shared his outrage. But the story doesn't stop there. Farage used the platform to demand a full independent inquiry into the grooming gang scandal. He made it clear that if Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer fails to act, he will take matters into his own hands. "I'm giving Starmer until the end of the month," he declared. "If he won't launch a national inquiry, I'll raise the money and we'll do it ourselves. The survivors deserve answers, and the perpetrators must face justice." Farage's blistering critique didn't stop with the police. He turned his attention to social services, councils and local authorities, all of whom he accused of complicity through inaction. Social services ignored what they were told. Councils turned a blind eye. Victims weren't believed. This was a systemic failure at every level. Unless we confront this head-on, we'll never be able to stop it from happening again. His speech has struck a chord with many, reigniting public anger over the issue. Survivors and their families have long been calling for justice, with many expressing frustration at the lack of meaningful action. Jack, whose daughter was a victim of grooming gangs, told GB News, "We've been failed time and time again. We need answers, and we need justice. If the government won't act, then someone has to." But the political fallout from Farage's speech is already creating ripples. The Labour Party, which has consistently opposed a national inquiry, is beginning to show cracks. Liverpool Walton MP Dan Carden became the first sitting Labour MP to break ranks with Sir Keir Starmer, publicly supporting calls for an inquiry. Carden's statement was a direct challenge to those who have dismissed the issue as a far-right obsession. "This is not a far-right issue," Carden said in an interview with GB News. "This is about justice. The British public want action. They want accountability for the unspeakable crimes committed against thousands of young girls. The scale of this scandal is horrifying, and the fact that it's been allowed to continue for so long is a national disgrace. Cardon's remarks echo those of Greater Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham, who recently called for a limited national inquiry. Burnham, who commissioned a local review in Oldham, argued that only a national probe with legal powers could compel key figures to give evidence and face justice. He also challenged claims from Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, who suggested that existing inquiries were sufficient. The scope of these previous inquiries was too narrow, Burnham said. We need something far more comprehensive to ensure accountability at every level. Farage's ultimatum to Starmer is only adding to the pressure. Survivors and their families have made it clear they won't accept anything less than a full, independent inquiry. Sam, a survivor who has been campaigning for justice, said, "A national inquiry is the only way to hold those responsible to account. Local reviews don't have the power to make real change. We need answers, and we need them now." Despite the growing calls for action, Labour has so far resisted the push for a new inquiry. On Wednesday, Labour MPs were whipped to vote against a Conservative-led motion to force a national probe, with 350 voting in opposition. However, whispers of dissent within the party are growing louder, with some MPs reportedly unhappy with the leadership's stance. Farage, for his part, remains undeterred. He dismissed the previous Alexis J. inquiry as a whitewash that barely scratched the surface of the scandal. "Unless we understand the full extent of what happened," he said, "we'll never be able to stop it from happening again." This is about more than just justice for the victims. It's about ensuring that no other child ever has to endure what they did. But as the debate over grooming gangs rages on, another contentious issue has emerged: the potential return of Shamima Begum, the ISIS bride whose citizenship was revoked after she joined the terror group. Farage sparked controversy by suggesting it might be time to reassess her case. His comments have divided opinion within Reform UK, with many party members vehemently opposing any possibility of Begum's return. "She made her choice," said Cameron Griffin, a Reform UK member. "She left this country to join a terror group. She knew what she was doing. Now she has to live with the consequences." The backlash to Farage's comments highlights the deep divisions surrounding issues of national security and justice. While he argues that the UK must confront these challenges head-on, critics say his remarks risk muddying the waters at a time when the focus should remain firmly on the grooming gang scandal. Farage's speech at the Reform UK conference has reignited a debate that many in power would rather avoid. But as public anger continues to mount, one thing is clear: the issue of grooming gangs is not going away. Farage's ultimatum to Starmer, combined with growing dissent within Labour, suggests that the calls for a national inquiry are only going to get louder. Whether Starmer will act, or whether Farage will make good on his promise to fund an independent investigation, remains to be seen. But for the survivors and their families, the message is clear: they will not rest until justice is served.